John
Mr.
Mckay.
Mckay, how do you do? How nice to meet you.
I do very well, thank you.
Good. Just been looking at your little pamphlet. Don't have time to read it. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this.
Pleasure.
You do a lot of talks to schools, do
Yes, we've been in a high school today. We're there 11s, 12s and 13s, so it's been good.
And
I mean, that's great grades.
Yeah. What sort of things do you tell them?
Well, today we dealt with some of what you'll see tonight, dealing with some of our fossils of giant kangaroos and things like that, and changes that can be observed between the fossils and the present day world, and then challenge them to think about, if creation was true, how would you recognise it if you fell over it?
Right. So how old are those fossils?
Well, if I was speaking as an orthodox geologist, I'd say anywhere between 100,000 and 10 million, right, up to 40 million, right? So the age is a product of our theories about how we view the world.
It's not a product of facts, not a product of evidence.
No, because, in my own geological research, I'm convinced that what Charles Lyell did to us all was give us a set of glasses to see the world through. So when we believe that whatever carbon-14 or that is doing now, it's always done, we have a philosophy about how the present connects to the past.
It's not just carbon-14 though, is it? I mean, there are about a dozen different radioactive
It doesn't really matter, because what you've got is a philosophy. You have to assume that the present is the key to the past, because you weren't there and I wasn't there.
Well, that's true.
So whatever age you get, or I get,
nevertheless,
starts with faith.
But it's not just carbon-14, is it? I mean, there's potassium, argon, and they all give the same answer, don't they?
No, they don't. Carbon-14 wouldn't give you any more than 70,000 years, even if it worked.
They overlap.
Well, they're designed. I mean, we keep looking for new dating methods for the simple reason that the last one didn't give us the answers we wanted.
That's not true. How old do you think the world is?
Okay, I believe, just like you believe it might be billions, I believe we've got no more data than is sufficient for 6,000 or 7,000 years. And the starting position for both of those is faith. Whether you like it or not, because I wasn't there and you weren't there.
Well, you don't have to be there, do you? I mean, there are all sorts of things where we weren't there, but the detective work, the evidence.
Well, your chief starting point is either history or a faith position that whatever the world is doing now, it's always done. So Charles Lyell said Niagara Falls is going backwards at 1 foot a year, divided into the gorge distance. That gives you 35,000 years. Okay, you theologians have to bow the knee. So there's where it all starts. Whatever the present world is doing, it's always done.
If there were only one method of dating, then you might have a point. But since there are so many and they overlap, and you've got dendrochronology, you've got carbon-14, you've got potassium argon, you've got uranium, and they overlap.
Perhaps it tells you that they're all using the same assumption. That's what it really tells you.
Why are you so desperate? I mean, it sounds as though you're really on a losing wicket, because, I mean,
it sounds like science. You need the world to be old for evolution to be true, because you want to rule God out.
We've got geology, we've got physics, we've got astronomy, we've got biology. Scientists and all these different disciplines converge upon an age of the Earth which is about 4.5 billion years.
Now look, let's be honest. They converge on that because they're using Charles Lyell's assumption. The present is the key to the past. That's a faith starting position. And quote unquote from Charles Lyell, my aim is to free science from Moses, and he's done it. Except for people like me who are willing to get up and look silly sometimes.
Well, it's not really fair to say that we have a faith position and then we try to make everything fit. I mean, there are so many different pieces of scientific evidence, and they all fit together. We don't have a faith position. If the evidence really supported a 6,000-year-old Earth, we'd agree.
Well, look, what your biggest problem is, Richard, when you deal with scientific evidence, you first of all have to believe things like man is rational, the world is real, and for every real and rational question there's a real and rational answer. If you don't believe those things, you don't even do science.
Why do you apply this just to evolution? I mean, why don't you apply it to any other science? I mean, why don't you believe the world is flat?
For the simple reason I've travelled around it. Right? In other words, you can observe in the present, but here's the problem with this issue, and we need to be honest. We're trying to go backwards. We weren't there. Charles Lyell's book, 1831, Charles Darwin, 1859. If I take Darwin and say, if this is true, what would the evidence be 100 million years ago? Then I'm stepping from the present back into the past. I have faith. If I do that with the Bible, I've got to be honest. It's a faith starting position. Anybody who says it isn't is not telling you the truth.
Well, the difference between 6,000 years and 4.6 billion years, it's equivalent to believing, if you believe the world is 6,000 years, it's equivalent to believing the distance from New York to San Francisco is 7.8 yards. I mean, that's the scale of the disagreement.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But the reality is I can measure the distance to New York from here exactly because it's in the present. The minute I step backwards, there's several things that I have to do. I have to assume, how is the present connected to the past? Charles Lyell deliberately set out to remove a biblical approach.
Lyell was a religious man. He had problems with
You're a
Darwin.
religious man. Be honest, Richard, you're an atheist, right?
That's not religion.
I'm afraid it is. That's your blind faith position for which you get nothing.
Nevertheless, Lyell was a Christian, and Lyell had problems with Darwin. Lyell was actually quite reluctant to believe Darwin.
Of course he did. But in the end, he's a disciple of his own disciple.
Well,
right. In reality, anybody who sets out to remove Moses from anywhere has a problem with Jesus Christ, who said, if you don't believe Moses, you don't believe me. John chapter 5. So you can call him a Christian. I would call him a church man. The two things are different.
You would place what's written in the Bible ahead of the whole of science, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't think even Isaac Newton would have had a problem with that statement. Yes, because he did too. But what's happened between then and now is the change in the glasses we wear. And if I'm achieving anything in schools or colleges, I'm getting the kids to say, okay, let's be honest, how are we seeing the world and what questions are we asking as a result? If I'm going to be a scientist, I have to believe I'm real, the world is real, we can ask real and rational questions. They are Christian presuppositions, not Buddhist presuppositions, not Hindu presuppositions. We got them exclusively from a biblical worldview. Even the word geology is invented by the Bishop of Durham. So we've got a big system of Christian thinking which predates anything you're talking,
I'm
which
trying
actually
to,
gave
I'm
us
trying to
off
work out whether you're for real, because I can't believe you're really sincere. I mean, I think you. I'm trying to work out where you're coming from. You can't seriously believe what you're saying you believe. So I'm wondering what your agenda is.
Okay, well, you may have trouble with seriously believe, but I've been doing it for 20 years, so obviously it must be a good act, right?
Yeah,
and
I believe it's obviously a good act.
And in reality, you will find there are many young people who are now Christians as a result of what we decided, okay, the young people are having trouble with Christianity. What's their problem? It's creation versus evolution 9 times out of 10 in this present world.
I believe it. But what do you say when you meet somebody like a bishop? I mean, bishops don't go along with you, do they? I mean, they all accept evolution as God's way of doing things.
Well, I had a good debate against John Polkinghorne, and he actually lost that debate, and it's worth seeing, right?
Well,
it's available free on TV.
In what sense did he lose it?
Well, let's put it this way. Politely, we wiped the floor if you want to see the debate, because he was trying to argue the God of the Bible used evolution, and Charles Darwin would have been the first to disagree, because the God of the Bible says he made the world good, and evolution hasn't got such a concept. Everything's just natural.
Yes.
Death is part of the system.
Well, that's
the
true.
biblical God says there was no death until sin. So you can have a God, but it's your own imagination, right? So you have to cut that line in two.
Yeah, what about thorns? Are you one of those who believes that thorns didn't come into the world until after Adam fell?
Yeah, I am, but you see, what you're really saying is that roses started out without thorns, but then my biology professor said that too.
Yeah.
Because we have to start from seaweed, which doesn't have thorns, and then up with roses, which does.
You're just playing with words now, aren't
No,
you?
I'm not, because you have to explain where thorns come from too. But you take millions of years with the Prince and the Toad sort of story.
Yeah, what about thorns being found in the same fossil beds as dinosaurs? What do you make of that?
Well, you've got to remember that the word geology, as I said, was invented by the Bishop of Durham. Our original geologists were all catastrophists. They were basically creationists in their concept. What you and I have done is relook at the geological record through Charles Lyell's eyes.
I don't really care about the original geologists. What about modern geologists?
Right, the fact is, you have a story about the rocks and the past. When I go out on a dinosaur dig and I dig up a dinosaur, it doesn't come with a label that says, "Hi, I was here 200 million years ago. I found it in the hole today," and then I proceed to try and work out a story which I actually can't get back to check.
So you
Now,
think
that's the
dinosaurs
difference.
coexisted with humans?
I've no problem with that at all.
Okay. And why don't we see fossil dinosaurs and fossil humans together then?
Why would you? I mean, if you had a worldwide flood today, would you expect kangaroos to be buried with Brits?
Well, not necessarily. But,
Good.
but,
You've made the point I'm trying to make.
But you would expect to see dinosaurs coexisting with modern mammals.
Okay, define your word coexisting. Do you mean in the same layer?
Yes.
Right, for the simple reason that you believe each layer got there one on top of the other, and they all took vast amounts of time to get there. Now, I'll tell you what I've done in reverse to challenge geologists with this. Go to the Grand Canyon, start at the top with Joe Tourist. It's a half a mile down to the bottom of the fossils, and in our orthodox geology, we say that's about 300 million years worth of time. Okay, let's reverse the question we normally ask and say, if it really took that long, How much rock on average is laid down each year? Answer, about a 40th of, 1 by 10 to the 4th of an inch. It's insignificant. So something's wrong with our stories
Well, it
somewhere.
doesn't happen continuously, does it? It happens.
But if it doesn't, now you've shot evolution in the foot.
No, you haven't.
Because you have a fossil record full of gaps, which is Charles Darwin's biggest problem.
Of course you have a fossil record full of gaps. Everyone knows that.
Great.
But you
That's
don't,
one
what you
reason
don't
why
get
I
is you
ceased
don't
being
get
an
fossils in the
evolutionist.
wrong order, do you? You don't find, as J.B.S. Haldane said, fossil rabbits in the Cambrian.
Well, I haven't found a fossil rabbit in the Cambria, but I tell you what, I was out in Wales the other day, and here we have a lovely mixture of land plants all in with seashells, and I found exactly the same beds in the USA, and I'm convinced that Derek Ager, evolutionist as he was, right, anti-creationist, but a catastrophist, was right when he said the early catastrophist geologists were much more objective than the present day ones. And you, above all people, should know that we've got currently the thinking of punctuated equilibrium, because it works better than Darwin's slow punctuated theory, right? Slow, progression theory.
Yeah, well,
it really does.
I wouldn't. For me, Darwin's inspiration comes from evidence. But where do you think Darwin was coming from? Where did Darwin get his inspiration from?
Well, I think the BBC programme, which had him sitting outside the church on his daughter's gravestone, refusing to go inside, because we've got to remember he had a master's degree in theology, right, is a real key to understanding. As his great-great-grandson Richard wrote in Nature or Science, I can't remember which one, that when Charles Darwin's favourite daughter Annie died, he turned his back on Christianity. It's only after that that he felt free to actually embrace all of his evolutionary theology, is what I call it. So his inspiration is really, I'm angry if there's a good God, why should my favourite daughter die and my poor innocent little girl? A good question. His answer is ultimately, there's no God, everything just happens naturally.
But Annie died in 1851, and Darwin wrote a pretty full sketch of his theory in 1844.
Yeah, but he published it in what year?
1859.
Good. So he felt free after that to actually go with it. Yeah. Right? Before 1859, he's hesitant, he doesn't publish. Right? He's pushed on by competitors, he's pushed on by his own thinking. You can even see it in his books. When he starts out in book 1, there's still a creator there. By the time you get to book 2 and 3, his creator is out the window.
But in 1844, he had this full theory. Why would he have developed that theory if he didn't think the evidence?
Well, if you lived in Victoriana England and all the bishops were some sort of catastrophic creationist, you would have to be a brave man. Unfortunately for him, he was independently wealthy, so he didn't really care in the end. But like most of us, he goes from his daughter dying up to the publishing, and there is a progression there, just as there is a progression after he publishes his first book, and it's more and more anti-Christian.
Well, but you can't say that it was his daughter dying that inspired him, because he wrote it out.
Well, I'd suggest you read what his great-great-grandson Richard said, because he would reach that sort of conclusion. That was a motivating factor.
You don't feel he was motivated by Satan?
He never admits to anything like that. I don't have any evidence he went to seances, right? So I wouldn't be silly enough to say that.
I thought I'd read that you had said it somewhere.
Well, you'd have to find it for me. I can't remember saying anything like that at all. So I wouldn't, it's not what he says.
Yeah. What sorts of things do you tell the children when you lecture to children?
Okay, we've just put a new three-dimensional website up, which has got the whole course that we do in schools, particularly the public schools. So anybody who wants to hear the full answer can go to evidenceweb.net, click on education, and then they'll see the whole high school course, which deals with basically that question. If creation is true, or if evolution is true, how would you recognise the evidence if you fell over? Because my view of education is, if you can teach the kids how to think, you're miles ahead from teaching them what to think. Because then they will be able to think, which is what this country and every other country in the West needs.
Certainly all for teaching them to think.
Good, great, excellent. We agree on one thing.
Well, I'm not sure we really do, actually, but still. There must be a lot of money behind you if you could put together three-dimensional websites.
We have supporters, and folks can go and see us at evidenceweb.net, and they're free to make donations, but no, you wouldn't say this is the way to get rich. I used to earn a lot more when I was lecturing in geology for technical education.
You were lecturing in geology?
Yeah, for technical education.
You have a degree in geology then?
I got a degree in geology, and in education too. So,
Are your donations tax-free?
In different countries they are. Like you have a system here, they have a different system in America, so it would depend on what each group in each country.
So which countries is it tax-free in?
It's tax-free in America, in England. I mean, you have your sort of reverse system.
It's tax-free. I know that.
Trusts,
reverse system.
So you have that. In America, it's a slightly different system, but the result is the same.
But that means that in Britain, your enterprise is supported by the British taxpayer, in effect.
Yeah, well, you've got to remember the government got the money off the taxpayer in the first place, so please don't say it's their money.
I do remember that.
The point I love to make is that it's God who provides for all of us, atheists included.
Yeah, well, I mean, tax-free charities are supposed to be good for the public. They're supposed to be good for education or good for something like that. Can you really claim that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And if the question were raised in Parliament,
to these TV crews that they should come to schools and watch us, right, and see the results in kids who learn how to think. And again, go to evidenceweb.net, click on the Search for the Origin Life program, and learn how to think yourself. Good.
I shall do that. Okay. It does rather seem to me that it's rather like sort of going back more than a century, actually, a century and a half.
Well, we had a very clever premier in our state, and somebody accused him of turning back the clock 30 years, and he said yes, but then we had no inflation and no unemployment. So I have no problem with saying, yes, I had this concept from that long ago, but I grew up outside the church, so I didn't grow up brainwashed with this. It's the result of finishing my university course, listening to students say, if evolution is true, why can't we see it happening? Third-year genetics question to the professor.
You take that question seriously, do you?
Oh, yeah. And the professor, his answer, I took even more seriously when he said, well, it happened so slowly you wouldn't expect to see it happening, and all of a sudden I thought, hang on.
And that's true.
Good. So in other words, what you don't see happening is not science. It's unobservable, and you were the first person
You're using the word
PBS.
see. You're using the word see as meaning see within one lifetime. If a phenomenon takes millions of years, of course you're not going to see it.
Which means you have a faith position, and you need to admit it
means
because
you have to use other
there.
evidence than the evidence of one man's eyes. It means you have to look...
sorry, Darwin was only 1859. That's only 150 years ago almost, right? And you haven't seen it, and I haven't seen it, so please stop calling it science. Teach it philosophy
there's more
or
to
history.
seeing than just seeing with one man's eyes. You can see through geologist's eyes, you can see through instruments' eyes. And you know perfectly well that we have instruments that can measure things that the human eye can't see.
And now
you
we're
might
back
as well
to
say
the
you
start.
don't believe in electrons.
Now we're back to the start because you have to assume what you're seeing now is always applied. I mean, that's your faith position to remove Moses.
You can't see electrons, and I mean, do you not believe in electrons?
Well, I'm afraid if you can't see God, do you not believe in God? Let's be objective here, Richard. I have no problem with electrons, but
why not?
Here now.
Because you can't see them.
No. I can actually run them through bits of paper, right? See the results.
We have instruments that can
But the minute you start to turn that backwards and say it was doing the same thing 150, 200 million years ago, please admit to the audience your faith and call what you're teaching philosophy or atheism if you're going to really be honest, and my time is up.
That's ridiculous. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.